Our fifth dimension is something that we call proprietary. So firstly, the traditional classroom, whether it's didactic or authentic, is a very enclosed space. It's one teacher with four walls and 20, 30 students, whatever the number happens to be. It's a private kind of space. And also, it's very much about individual knowledge. It's what I can remember in didactic pedagogy, or it's what I can figure out for myself in authentic pedagogy. But what we want to do in these spaces is open them out. There's a set of, there might be small groups working, larger groups working, groups that involve the whole school, groups that also engage the community. And they're working in collaborative knowledge ecologies where it's not just individual thinking, but it's giving feedback to other people. It's writing things in collaboration with other people, or doing work of all sorts in collaboration with other people. So it's a highly engaging social environment. And what we have also is a shift from the teacher being a kind of a person who's in a private, ephemeral relationship to the kids in the classroom. And when I say private, the door's closed. Ephemeral means that everything spoken disappears into the air. But in fact, what we have is teachers building documented learning designs which might be shared well beyond the classroom, which facilitate different learning paths. So in other words, there's a big shift in the social and collaborative nature of teachers' work as well. Sixth is epistemological. So, didactic pedagogy told you the answer and you remembered it, or told you the procedure, told you some facts, told you the theorem and you were able to apply it. But in some senses, a narrow version of constructivism is second-guessing the right answer. So you've come to the answer yourself, and to get there, you had to second guess it, and you figured out the workings that get you there. So you rather than just remember something you've been told, you've internalized those processes yourself. Right, but in a sense, this is not a totally open-ended form of knowledge. Constructivism is not a completely open-ended form of knowledge. So what we have with what we're calling new learning or reflexive pedagogy is a move from facts and calculations. So, you might have facts and calculation equally in didactic pedagogy and authentic pedagogy, to information arrays where I make claims based on evidence, where I make arguments, I do reasoning, active reasoning, where I write narratives which bring things together in a coherent kind of way. So in other words, what we're doing is expecting that students build these things that we call complex epistemic performance. So just simply a la constructivism, internalizing a procedure, sure, that's not the same as memorizing a procedure, but just internalizing it means that you've simply replicated something you've been told to do, where these, what we're proposing here, are much more active forms of knowledge making than is even possible in constructivism. What we're assuming too is that learners will be reflexive knowledge producers, right? So instead of being knowledge consumers, stuff they've been given, they will be knowledge producers, but always checking the facts, rethinking things themselves, building overall interpretive frameworks that tie things together, actively building knowledge themselves. And also, we're expecting not only students to be designers of knowledge, but also co-designers in their own learning. So they're just, they're actively involved in making navigation paths through their learning, and taking responsibility for that learning as co-designers. Our seventh point is pedagogical, and here I'm going to return to a diagram that we have, our little mapping of pedagogy that we've used several times through these various video series. And this is, if you like, a series of knowledge processes in which we might become involved. If you like, it's a kind of a schema or a checklist of the kinds of knowledge processes. And what didactic pedagogy typically did was conceptualizing, name things in the world, volcanoes, for example, put them together into theories, which is the theory of volcanic activity, because there are a number of components that go on there. And these are things that you learned. The French Revolution and the causes thereof, algebra and how it works. So this is stuff so primarily that was the kind of focus. If we go to the other axis here, though, progressivism pushes in the direction of experiential learning, which is bring in bits of your own life, make sure that learning is authentic and true to your own life in order to do things which are slightly outside that frame of reference, which is experiencing the new, which is, again, experiential, inquiry learning. All these words were an important part of the progressivist repertoire. What we might do in progressivism, we might do some application as well, apply things to the real world. Not very often we might do some analysing, certainly functional analysing in didactic pedagogy, which is, how does this formula work kind of thing. So what we have here is a number of things that we call knowledge processes. And each of these pedagogies had a kind of a bias. There were some things that were more characteristically part of didactic pedagogy, more characteristically part of authentic pedagogy than not. So what we're kind of arguing is that is a kind of recovery of some of the ideas in didactic and authentic pedagogy into a more holistic pedagogy where we employ a wider range of knowledge processes. And in a sense, what we're interested in is not the facts that you can know or the processes that you can reproduce. We're interested in building you as knowing persons. These forms of knowing are things that you can apply in your life, in your workplace, in your community, in encountering a new domain of knowledge. So in a sense, what we're interested in is not what you can know, but the kind of knowing person you can become using this range of knowledge processes. And finally, we have this notion of a moral perspective. What's the underlying set of ethical principles, social and political agendas that underlie this form of education? What kinds of person is this kind of education designed to produce? Well, we know with didactic pedagogy, command and compliance, it's people who were disciplined and to do as they were told, who would accept authority and undertake whatever they were told to do. So what kinds of persons do we want now? The answer is a different kind of person. So people who take responsibility in their knowing and their learning, but also people who, when they leave school, when they're out there in that other world outside of school, are actively participating workers, citizens, community members. Just to round this off now and to round off the three paradigms that we've been talking about, is that, for the sake of the heuristic, for the sake of building models, for the sake of being clear, we've made these distinctions between didactic, authentic, and reflexive or transformative pedagogy. But history isn't a straight line. We find instances of all of this stuff happening all the time. For instance, with e-learning, there's a lot of didactic pedagogy in e-learning environments. What we've done is we've retooled the technologies to reproduce those old-fashioned ideas of what learning involves. So, it's complicated, it's messy, but also the other aspects of learning that I've been discussing in didactic pedagogy and authentic pedagogy, there are a lot of interesting insights in there, and what we really want to have is a repertoire of pedagogical moves. So with the knowledge process idea, it's actually building a balanced repertoire where moves are complementary to each other. So it's not saying we had didactic, we had authentic, now we got new learning, we're going to throw everything away in the previous traditions. It's about how we rebuild in an integrated way and a complementary kind of way the experiences of each of these traditions.